Hey, what's up, bros? I did a video not long ago talking about the amazing Radian Ramjet and Afterburner combo on the Glock platform. And immediately you guys in the comments were like, well, check it out on the P365. So that's what we're doing today. But rather than using a basic P365 as a baseline, I have the upper from a Macro Comp that is going to function as our baseline for the tests. And I have my PMM JTTC upper that I got a few years ago that will be running it against. The PMM compensator has a smaller expansion chamber, so I'm not exactly certain what's going to happen. I suspect that what's going to happen is that the Ramjet Afterburner is going to work better because it has a bigger expansion chamber. I'm not a fluid dynamicist, so I don't know exactly how it's going to go. That's why we do this stuff. And obviously, this is bro science. It's not real science. I'm not putting these things in vices that measure like how much without, you know, a grip to mitigate recoil, because while that's interesting data to know how much recoil is eliminated through the use of compensators, if it's an academic difference and you can't exploit it, what's the point in knowing it? Like, yes, technically that's correct, but in real world use, which is in somebody's hands, it's basically the same. So that's why I don't do it from a rest or anything like that. There's a ton of other variables. You guys are probably going to jump in and tell me why it's not real science. I know it's not real science, but it's data and it's fun. So let's jump into it. All right. So there is a look at the Ramjet and Afterburner combination. It also has the backstrap and the magwell that they offer for the P365 frame. Yes, this was sent in for video by the guys at Radian, but I'm going to let the data speak for itself. I'm going to try not to show you my opinion on the stuff, but I figure you'd want to know that. It is a pretty handsome looking little combination there. It looks great. Comes off the gun by just loosening this cross pin that's held in place with a little bit of threading, so you can take it apart and clean it just like you would, you know, otherwise. Now, I'm going to show these guns to you. There's different lowers involved for the testing. I'm only going to use one lower so that we have, you know, consistency. They do have different recoil springs just because I don't want to swap recoil springs every single time. If it becomes to be an issue, we'll, you know, figure it out and swap the springs. But that's the Ramjet Afterburner. And this is the PMM JTTC compensator with their proprietary threading. It basically was the OG in the space to make this little tiny short compensator that fits on what was originally an XL frame, but eventually kind of the macro as well. So it's the same length as a macro, but with a more effective compensator. You're getting the same barrel length as the typical Macro Comp slide, but you're getting a true compensator that's going to catch a lot more of the ejecta and redirect it up, and it just provides more compensation, like observably more compensation than the macro. The problem with this system is that if you want to go clean it, you can't take the barrel out of the slide unless you want to use a vise, and that's you know, that is a thing. So a lot of people aren't going to care. They'll just, you know, clean the slide with the barrel in there. It doesn't really affect the gun maintenance a whole lot. And for an EDC, I doubt it matters all that much. As long as you're keeping, you know, slide velocity up and oil, getting the gunk out of there, it's pretty much good to go. So there is the JTTC. And of course, the old baseline is the Macro Comp, whatever this thing's called. But the 3.1-inch barrel, there is no actual muzzle device that screws onto the end of it. It utilizes a shorter barrel. You can see it there. It utilizes a shorter barrel, so the gas comes out of the barrel, and then these two little fins kind of catch some of it and direct it up. I would wonder how much of the recoil mitigation comes from the actual redirection of the gas up versus it's a 3.1-inch barrel in a, you know, whatever this is, a 3.6 length slide. So you're not getting as much combustion out of the ammunition. There's not as much, you know, powder being converted into gas and energy. So maybe part of the recoil mitigation is the fact that you're getting less combustion in this barrel. But all of these compensators being tested have that same amount of barrel before the compensator. So the effect of compensation is going to be observable. These do shoot a little bit nicer than just using a, you know, typical P365 XL upper. Definitely do shoot nicer than that, but I'm curious how much of it is due to the gas redirecting, how much of it is just simply not as much powder combusting in those barrels, so we'll see. All right, I realize this has a dot on it, but I'm not taking it off for the video because I don't think the results are going to be tainted by it. The degree of which the results are, certainly, but let's get after it. PMM is going to go second because the expansion port is just a little bit smaller than what's on the Radian. The Radian has the biggest expansion port, so we're going to kind of go from there. Afterburner, same lower and everything. Here we go. Yep, this super weak ammo is not going to kick the rounds out. I kind of picked this ammo first before moving on. 365 white box, ready to go in the original Macro Comp. Let's see what happens now. PMM white box, here we go. Let's see what happens all the same. I don't know what the slow motion's gonna show. It'll show what it is. I think the perception behind the gun is maybe a slight recoil advantage to the Ramjet, but you know, let the slow motion guide you on that front. All right, breaking out the high dollar ammo for the Federal HSTs and see how it runs first out of the Macro Comp as a control. So that is clearly a stouter load than the Winchester White Box 115. It hit in the hand, it jumped quite a bit. I imagine the other two are going to be significantly nicer to shoot, but let's see what happens. Let's go. That was significantly softer than the Macro Comp slide, like way softer. So that's pretty good stuff out of Mr. PMM. The ejection wasn't a ton further from the gun. I don't know why that is. It might have something to do with this extractor more than anything, but let's see what happens with the Afterburner. All right, Mr. Radian Ramjet Afterburner with the Federal HSTs. The ejection wasn't a whole lot different from what we saw with the PMM Comp. It's still throwing the brass, you know, a healthy amount from the gun, but not, you know, my tripod right here for the slow motion camera is basically taking the brass at the same location. So very similar. I would say that in the hand, it's in the same ballpark. I'll let slow motion guide which one has less energy on it, but it's very much in the same ballpark. All right, we've got the baby grip on the Macro Comp. Let's see what this is going to do. Definitely a little bit more flippy, a little bit more violent than the big grip, the macro grip. The macro grip is a full-length grip, whereas this is that stupid little baby one. So I think I definitely prefer the big grip, but it wasn't terrible to shoot. It shot well. The ejection is the best on this, but I think the compensation is also significantly less, but that's why we're using it as a baseline. PMM with the baby grip. Let's go, boys. That one didn't feed. Let's top it off and give it another shot there. If it's not going to work with this, it's probably not going to work with the Ramjet either. It's not limp wrist. It's another stuck case that time. The ejection going like basically straight up and not kicking out to the right is an issue. I don't know if that's due to the barrel and compensator, if it's due to this particular extractor that's in this gun. I mean, it's the same ejector on both gun uppers, so don't know what's going on there. But do you guys want to place bets as to whether this is going to cycle or not? I apparently cannot shoot the little baby gun particularly well with the big fat compensators on it. Let's see what happens. That's way nicer to shoot than the compensator, the short barrel compensator thing from Sig. It's not the Macro Comp anymore. I don't know what they call it, but that worked well. Let's swap the recoil springs and see if we can't get the PMM to work. Maybe that's the issue. Let's see if we can get this sucker to run. Maybe I've figured out how to shoot. Clearly, that one worked, which made no sense because it's a stiffer, newer recoil spring that I put in this gun. But you see that the brass just isn't thrown as far, and I really don't understand why. It's very similar feeling to the Ramjet. Like they're very similar. I think you'd have a hard time comparing them kind of side by side. That's exactly what I need to do now. Just for giggles, I put that recoil spring that wasn't working with the PMM on the Ramjet. Let's see if it's got the same issues now. Yeah, it does. Maybe that spring is not to spec. I don't know why that would be, but there we go. All right, I have both guns on two different macro grip lowers. The triggers are a little bit different, and one of them is featuring the Radian backstrap / magwell system, which is pretty neat, but it's not exact. This isn't exactly science. That's why we call it bro science. Let's just go back to back with these things and see if there's really a discernible difference. Okay, that felt good. The PMM feels squishier, like it feels, I won't say like the recoil feels less, but it's probably due to the backstrap. I think the Radian backstrap helps it punch in your hand a little bit harder because it's got these serrations, so you kind of feel it. But the flip, I would say, is very, very similar. Let's just try them with a bunch of different types of ammo and see what they'll work with. Got some Blazer here. Let's go with, we'll do Ramjet first again. That felt pretty good, Mr. PMM. The slide won't lock back on the PMM slide for whatever reason. If it wasn't such a pain in the butt to take this comp off and put on a different gun, I'd like to try it on a different gun just to see if that extractor is what's causing the issue there. But let's try some more ammo. American Eagle 147 grain. Let's see what happens. Ramjet. That felt fine. That's the most egregious ejection pattern of any of them so far. It's basically going straight up. It wasn't kicking out to the side at all. I think there's probably something with this extractor. At least that's what I'm guessing it is. But the recoil impulse, I would say, is very, very similar. Buffalo Creek 147 grain hollow points defensive loads. These things pack a wallop. That didn't feed amazingly well with that ramjet. Let's see what happens. It's going to kick a lot. Yeah, easily the stoutest handful that we've shot today, but it wasn't unpleasant. That fed better on the PMM barrel, but let's see what happens. I can say definitively on that load, the ramjet softened that up more than, so this is the first time where it doesn't feel like, it kind of feels the same, like it definitely, the Buffalo Creek shows that that one felt a little bit nicer. Although the ejection's so weird on that other barrel, I don't understand why. Nosler 124 grain ASP ammunition. This is basically like target ammo. So I have every expectation that this is going to choke these guns because it's very mild recoiling. Okay, ran well. Out of Mr. Ramjet, PMM. Okay. They both ran it, no big deal. Alrighty, boys. Both of these guys, they're both great compensators. The Ramjet, I think at the extreme end with the higher pressure stuff, does a little bit better job on the compensation than the PMM. But on most loads, you can't really tell a difference. I think it's largely academic. But the PMM could run the Buffalo Creek no problem, whereas the Ramjet choked on the Buffalo Creek, which doesn't have a ton of gas and is kind of a lower velocity loading. So they have different sort of operating windows a little bit, it seems. I can't really tell you what happened with the way the brass is being thrown out of this particular gun. It was just going straight up, and I don't know, it must be the extractor on this slide is different than the extractor on this slide. I can say that I tried to take this compensator off, and it is more of a struggle than I was willing to endure just to do the video. That's why there's two uppers in this. And from an ease of use perspective, this one takes the cake by a lot because it just has one little tool that you unscrew that pin and everything's good. Whereas this, you're going to have to get a vise and a lot of cuss words to get off the gun. This is the point in the video where you people who have experience with these two products need to sound off in the comments and share that experience with other people who are interested in this stuff. This is just my experience and my data that I'm showing to you guys. You guys have more experience with this stuff, and you should tell people about it so that they can make good decisions. So yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. If you want to watch the Afterburner comp video on the Glock platform, you can see that here.